All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's live stream. Today we're going to be talking about racing your best in heat and humidity with Stride, and we're going to be showcasing some really cool tools to adjust your power target so you can race your best, and some really cool statistics that really frame how important accounting for heat and humidity are in training and racing. So the topic list for today, first we're going to be talking about the impact of heat and humidity on race performance and presenting some really cool facts. And then we're going to be jumping into a demo and some examples with three great tools to adjust your power target for heat and humidity, including Super Power Calculator, Race Power Calculator, and the new environmentally adjusted power on Apple Watch feature. And then we're going to end with a Q&A to answer any questions you have about the presentation or about Stride. So let's jump into it with some really cool facts about running in heat and humidity. So, according to one study, a quarter of endurance running events were held in moderate, high, or extreme heat conditions. So, this just shows that heat and humidity does play a frequent role in training and racing. And this is specifically for races when, races are typically held in the morning when it's a bit cooler. But, this also speaks to that training runs are impacted too, especially, considering, summer takes up, one season of the year. And as you transition that from spring and back into fall, where you have cooler conditions, really accounting for temperature and accounting for heat humidity is a year-round deal. And this is especially important if you're not a marathoner, because according to the same study, this number of impacted races reached one half when marathons were excluded. And this makes sense because marathons are longer duration, the longer the event is, the more heat and humidity matter because you're out there in the conditions longer. It's going to have a higher impact on your physiology and your performance. So typically, marathons have to be held in the spring or in the fall when conditions are cooler, or early in the morning when conditions are cooler. And that plays less of an impact when you're running 5K through half marathons. So race organizers account for those things less. So if you're running, a shorter distance in marathon, it's likely you're going to be running into hot and humid conditions more often and more frequently. And what is the impact this has on your performance? So, according to the same study, for every degree outside of optimal conditions, performance declined by 0.3 to 0.4%. So, that's a pretty predictable and significant impact on your running performance. And this is actually good news for runners because since it is a predictable and significant impact, that means we can make predictable and quantifiable changes to your power targets and your performance. And we're going to be targeting for these races so you can still race your best in these conditions. Another interesting statistic I picked up from another study is the question of, are all runners impacted equally? So here's a quote from that study that says, there is a progressive slowing of marathon performance as the WBGT, and WBGT stands for wet bulb globe temperature, and I'll explain that in a moment here, increases from 5 to 25 degrees Celsius. This seems true for men and women of wide-ranging abilities, but performance is more negatively affected for slower populations of runners. So for that wet bulb globe temperature, the WBGT, that is a measure of heat stress in direct sunlight, which takes into account temperature, humidity, wind speed, sun angle, and cloud cover. And temperature, humidity are listed there first because they're the most significant factors. So um, we can see that if you're on the slower end of the spectrum, if you're not finishing as fast as the elites, since you're out there for a longer duration of time, it's been hypothesized that your performance is going to be impacted more greatly by temperature and humidity. So that's especially important if you're not an elite, that it is even more important to account for temperature and humidity. But also, weather is unpredictable. It can also impact the elites just as much as the non-elites. So in the case of the Boston Marathon, which is a spring marathon, and performance there, very elite runners, especially some of the best in the world on the elite side and on the amateur side as well. Here's a quote from Runner's World on the 2012 edition that said, the recorded temperature on the course peaked at 89 degrees during the hottest Boston in many years. The men's and women's winning times were both 9 minutes slower than the year before when the race was held on a cool day with prevailing headwind. So you can see that also temperature and humidity can play a pretty large role on elite races as well. So it's not just impacts amateurs on the slower end, but can also impact elites on the fast side as well. So in summary, we can see temperature and humidity play a massive role in performance, especially on race day. A significant number of races are impacted by heat and humidity. This is especially important if you're not a marathoner. Heat and humidity have a predictable and significant impact on performance. This is a great thing because that means we can adjust our race plan. And amateur and elite runners are both impacted by heat and humidity. So now the question is, what should we do about this? What should we do about the heat and humidity? How can we adjust our power target for these conditions? And we have three really fantastic tools in the Stride ecosystem. First, the Superpower Calculator. Second, the Race Power Calculator available on Power Center and the Stride mobile app. And the third is the new environmental power feature on our latest update of the Stride Apple Watch app. So we're going to jump into some example and demo of each tool and how you can use these. So the first is the Superpower Calculator. So for some of you, you might not be aware of this tool because this was created a number of years ago, and it's definitely more popular to use some of the like the Race Power Calculator these days. But this is a really easy tool. It is super flexible. It's available for everyone. So let me jump back here, and this is accessible via this link here, powerpacing.run/superpower-calculator. And let's take a look at that website. So if we jump over this website, this is going to explain how to use the tool, how you can access the tool. And it's pretty easy. What you can do is go to this website, go to step one, and you're basically going to make a copy of a Google Sheet. And this will be available in your Google account, your Google Drive. And effectively, this is just a spreadsheet tool where you can start to use the Superpower Calculator. So I've already created a duplicate on my account, and I have access to this spreadsheet here. And we are going to jump into an example on how this tool can be used. So the first example I want to cover using the Superpower Calculator is a sudden shift in the weather. So let's imagine this scenario. You have weeks of cool weather, let's say 60 degrees Fahrenheit, followed by a really hot day in higher humidity. And actually, we had this recently in Boulder where it was raining for weeks and weeks and weeks. There's a lot of cloud cover. We were able to get our runs in cooler weather, 60 degrees. Then all of a sudden, the rain cleared up and it was super hot. The temperature jumped by 25 degrees, and it became a challenge to run. You could, as soon as you stepped out the door, you got your first few miles in, you could tell there was a pretty significant impact on performance here. So we have a few parameters we can plug into the Superpower Calculator and see how this impacts our performance. So first, we want to consider we've been training for the last few weeks in 60-degree temperature, and then we're going to have a jump in temperature, and we're going to have a long run scheduled for this day. So how should we adjust that power target? So let's jump into the Superpower Calculator here. So the first thing you want to do is actually select the adjust power, air power, or FTP based on altitude, temperature, and humidity. So you can click this drop down here and select that from the list. So under other functions here, tap on adjust power, air power, or FTP based on altitude, temperature, and humidity. And the inputs here are pretty simple. So the first thing we want to do is input that power target for the run. So let's say I'm going to do my long run at 300 watts. I'm definitely a heavier runner, so this power might be higher than you're relatively used to. So input the power that you would run at for your long run. And then input the temperature typical conditions here. So I'm going to put in 1,600 meters, roughly 1 mile high for Boulder here. And I'm going to put in 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to put in a higher humidity than it really is, but this is just to illustrate the point. And then we're going to be adjusting to a higher temperature of 85 degrees. And what you're going to see here is the environmental adjustment is 94% of what I'd typically be running at. So that's going to be dropping my power target by about 5.5%. So my long run, I would typically do at 300 watts. I'd be doing it 283 watts instead. So we can see that here. I'm bringing my power target down by 5.5%. I'm going from 300 watts to 283 watts this run. And I'm making that adjustment purely based on the temperature for that day. And It depends on how you adjust to heat and humidity. You want to definitely track this in your run notes. You can record those on Power Center, see how you feel in the temperature and humidity conditions. But for some runners, it can take up to 2 weeks to adjust to more hot and humid conditions. So, for example, if it continue to remain that hot over the next few weeks, I would continue to modify that power target down until I adapted. And towards the end of those 2 weeks, of course, I'd be much closer to 300 watts again as I got used to the hotter and more humid conditions, and I would be running that long run, let's say 2 weeks from now at 300 watts instead of adjusting downwards because I'd be adjusted. But you can see the power of using this tool for for a sudden shift in the weather for adjusting that single run. Let's jump into the next example here. So superpower calculator example number 2. So a cool, fast race morning. So here in Colorado, since we're at a higher altitude, the temperature can really shift, very drastically from the morning into the afternoon. So, for example, it might be 62 degrees at the typical start time in a 6 a.m. race, but by midday, when I typically train, or the afternoon, it might be close to 90 degrees where I'm typically training. So, if I'm not typically racing or typically running or practicing at that cooler condition in the morning, um, I might be waking up on race morning in much more favorable conditions. I might be able to actually adjust my power target up for that race. So let's just take the example. So this is the conditions actually for today here in Boulder, where it started out very cool and the temperature quickly rose. Let's say I have been training at 89 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I have a race at 62 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning. So what is that going to do for my power target here? So once again, we'll jump over to the superpower calculator. I'm going to put in more reasonable humidity conditions, around 15% of what it typically is here in Colorado. And I'm going to input the temperature is 89, and I'm going to be adjusting down to a 62-degree temperature. So here we can see that the increase is 1.1%. I think I had originally calculated this at a different humidity, but you can see here I'm actually adjusting my power target up by a few percent. In this case, it's not going to be quite as high as I listed on the slide here. I'm going to be adjusting my power target up only by 1.1% in this case. So my original will go from 300 watts to roughly 303 to 304 watts. And I'm racing at higher wattage, being able to go faster, race faster than I typically would if I raced later in the day. One thing to be mindful of is if the critical power increases during a race like this, be mindful of that target for the next workout. So if I set my critical power in very cool conditions, and then I'm typically training in very hot conditions, you want to be mindful of the conditions in which you set that critical power. So you might have to adjust your workout targets down by a few percentage points if you set that critical power in very favorable conditions. So you can see the superpower calculator is super flexible. It's really great for one-off adjustments for all runs, whether it's training or racing. And it's easy to quickly quantify impact of all the different variables, including temperature, humidity, and altitude. And for any power target, this is available for all Striders, and it's free via Google Sheets. So definitely check that out. We'll put the link in the description of this video, but you can always go to the link here at powerpacing.run/superpower-calculator and access that tool. So the next thing we want to move on to is the race power calculator. Race power calculator, this is available on the Stride Power Center and the Stride mobile app. And let's jump into a few examples here on how we can use the race power calculator. And we're actually going to be using very similar examples to the superpower calculator. And now we get to see the impact of the estimated race finishing times. That's one of the really cool features of the race power calculator, in that not only do you get your power target adjusted, but you can also see how that's going to impact the estimated finishing time. So you know what your finishing time expectation should be. So we're going to take the example of 50 degrees up to 85 degrees. So let's say I have been training in 50-degree weather at kind of a normal humidity here. We're going to be running a marathon race. And my power target here is going to be 351 watts, and that's going to lead to an estimated finishing time of 3 hours and 18 minutes. But let's say I'm going to go race at a much higher temperature, 85 degrees. So we can plug that in right here and click calculate. And similar to the superpower calculator, we're going to have the adjusted power target, where the power has been adjusted down from 351 watts down to the 330 range. And we can also see the impact on my finishing time, where I've gone from 3 hours and 18 minutes to 3 hours and 29 minutes. So we can see a pretty big change in finishing time there, over 10 minutes, and a pretty big change in wattage. But that's going to be critical for me to consider on race day, because I'm not going to be able to maintain that higher power over that marathon. I have to bring that down during the hotter conditions. So once again, this is a really quick and easy way to see the estimated impact on the finishing time. And let's jump to example number 2, which is very similar to the superpower calculator example. What happens if you're running in cooler conditions? So we're going to be running a 10K this time, and we're going to be going from 62 degrees Fahrenheit up to 89 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's jump over and take a look at what that looks like here. So I'm going to put in 6.2 miles for my 10K. And we're going to have a temperature degrees of 62 degrees Fahrenheit. So we can see this is leading to a target power of 397 watts, 41 minutes, and 16 seconds. And I actually meant to put in 89 degrees here. Let me put in 89 degrees. There we go. So 89 degrees, 397 watts, and 41 minutes and 16 seconds. And let's say we have more favorable conditions at 62 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see now that actually my target time has dropped below 40 minutes. It is far more favorable, and I'm actually having a big increase in speed here. One thing to keep in mind when you are racing cooler conditions, you are going to have that increase in intensity and increase in speed and lead to drastically faster times. And one thing to be mindful here is if you have not trained at those faster speeds, higher intensities, you might be more comfortable in those conditions, but since you haven't trained at that speed and biomechanically, you might not be possible maintaining that speed. You might not be able to get that full benefit of the upward adjustment in those conditions. So one of the tips we're going to cover later is, if you do expect a much cooler race day, to make sure you practice those higher intensities so you are used to running at those, kind of simulate the race day conditions so you can get that full speed bump from the cooler conditions. So you can see here the tremendous advantages of the race power calculator. It's super convenient for race planning. It shows the impact not just on the power target, but the estimated finishing time. And it automatically tracks your environmental conditions over the last 90 days. I was inputting some hypotheticals in there, but you can see that by default, it does track those over the last 90 days. So you're not really sure what you're acclimated to. You're going to be able to get that. And it's available via the Stride membership. So all Stride membership users can use the race power calculator in the Stride mobile app and Power Center. And if you don't have the Stride membership, we also have the race calculations table, which does give you an estimated idea on your finishing times and target powers. You're not going to need to adjust based on temperature and humidity inside the Stride app, but you can take those values, and put those into the superpower calculators. So if I open the race calculations table on my Stride mobile app, I can get the estimated finishing time and power target, and then make an adjustment in the superpower calculator if you do start with that information. And finally, another really cool feature to adjust for heat and humidity is our new environmental power on Apple Watch. And we consider this kind of a beta/preview update for the Apple Watch. It's still kind of in active development. We're going to be adding a lot more features here to make this to take this to the next level. But let's look at some really cool ways on how you can use environmental power on the Apple Watch. So the first example here is And we're going to really approach this from more of a real-time usage example rather than kind of a race planning. So for the race power calculator and super power calculator, it's super useful to prepare that data ahead of time so you know what to expect for race day. For this feature, it's more of a real-time value you can monitor on the watch. So um, for example, with the environmental power feature, you can compare the real-time power output that you would typically see with Stride against the environmentally adjusted power. And that environmentally adjusted power is using the temperature and humidity conditions being collected from the Stride pod, and it's adjusting that power value based on your last 90 days of training, what you're used to, what you're adapted to. And it's making that adjustment, it's displaying that new real-time environmental power on your Apple Watch in real time. So here, for example, I'm walking at 100 watts, but based on the higher temperature of 86 degrees and the humidity is pretty low, 6%, but based on that higher temperature, um, it would really be like I'm walking at 103 watts as if I was in cooler conditions. So and when you can visualize the real-time power and the real-time environmental power at the same time, this is a really cool way to see the impact of the environment and just really get a strong quantification in your mind on what kind of impact that's having on your performance. The second example here is just daily adaptations. So it uses your last 90 days of training to really establish your kind of baseline training conditions. So here are my baseline training conditions, kind of cooler, higher humidity data, 66 degrees Fahrenheit, 62% humidity. And what's really cool is since this is continually updating with every run you do, so as we move into summer, we move into the later parts of June and July as the temperatures rise here in Colorado, we're going to see my training conditions increase, that temperature increase, and those environmental adjustments become smaller and smaller as I become more adjusted to the heat and humidity. So by the end of July, this could rise up to the mid to high 70s or even low 80s, and then when I go out for a long run, that environmental power is not going to adjust as much because I'm adjusted to the training conditions now, and I'm not going to need that adjustment until it starts getting cooler. And then that, as the conditions become more favorable, then, I'll be acclimated to hot conditions, and, the power target will be adjusted in the other direction as the weather gets cooler. So you don't have to think about it, just, adapts daily to the conditions you're in. So there's some really great advantage of using the environmental power on Apple Watch. It can be visualized next to the power value, so you can quantify that real-time impact. It automatically adjusts day by day as you complete every training session, see how you're adapting those conditions. It leverages the environmental sensors on Stride. It leverages those temperature and humidity sensors to make that really accurate real-time adjustment. I definitely recommend use this feature in combination with Race Power Calculator and Super Power Calculator. This will give you that real-time adjustment, but you can also see an impact on how that has on your time with the Super on the Race Power Calculator side. And we definitely want your feedback because this will guide the future of this feature. This has kind of been released in a beta/preview phase, and your feedback is going to guide the future of this feature development and help improve environmental power as it comes to more improvements come to Apple Watch. And we also release this feature on Garmin Watch and other platforms. And once again, this is available via Stride membership. So I made this point earlier, but something really important to keep in mind in cooler conditions, consider your ability to run at higher intensities. So let's say you are really acclimated to hot intensities and you go run in cooler conditions, that power target's going to be adjusted upwards. And you really want to consider your ability to maintain that higher speed, that higher power. Even though the conditions are more favorable, it might be hard to run 5% faster in really cool conditions because you might not be used to those speeds. So that's something to consider and also something to simulate and train. So if you're expecting a cool race day and more favorable conditions, simulate that power target in training. You might be able to get more, and you might be able to take full advantage of those of the more favorable conditions if you simulate that power target and practice it in training. So our themes so far, so we've had themes the last few months. If you've noticed, April was focused on racing with the Boston Marathon. May was focused on our training plan release. June, we've been talking about heat and humidity. And next month, we're going to be talking about predicting race capabilities. So definitely stay tuned for more emails, blog posts, Instagram posts, and webinars on how you can use Stride to predict race capabilities. So we're going to have some really cool workouts. We're going to have some more information on using Race Power Calculator and Race Calculations Table to predict race capability. So we're going to have a lot of great content coming up for you so you can have your most successful racing season, most successful summer of racing, fall racing with Stride. A few of the sources, if you want to check out some of the stats that I pulled on the environmental conditions of running, here are the sources to go check those out further. And now it's question time. So we've had a few questions come in. I'll be answering those here. And if you have any more questions, post them in the chat. We have a question from Nick Donaldson that asks, I just did a run with environmental adjustment on the Apple Watch. It is a really great feature. And on race day, would you use this metric or not? So that's a great question, Nick. And I would harken back to the point on combining the tools. So you definitely want to use Race Power Calculator in combination of environmental power to really understand what the power target should be for race day and what impact that's going to have on your time, because you really want to have both. You want to understand what time you're going to be finishing in, because of course we all want to race faster if the conditions allow, and you want to understand the power target you should be outputting. So I would set up your watch to be looking at the real-time power directly from Stride and the environmental power, and I would use the Race Power Calculator to understand the impact on the performance. So use those tools in combination, and definitely I would recommend visualizing both those values on race day, because sometimes it might feel hot, but really it's not as hot as you think. So, you can push harder, and sometimes it might feel cooler and, it's actually hotter than you think, and you need to adjust the target down, because, race day can just be funny in that way. And sometimes you're feeling better than you really are. Sometimes you're feeling worse than you really are. So, I would definitely have that on your watch on race day. We have a question from asking, where do I find Race Power Calculator? So Race Power Calculator is available on both the Stride Power Center at stride.com/power center and the Stride mobile app. So on Power Center, you can access that, and I'll just jump in here and show you. You can access that on the left sidebar here on this Tools tab. And when you click on that, it'll pull up this interface if you meet the required number of runs, which I think practically everyone should meet. You just need around 10 runs in order to have the Race Power Calculator come up. So practically everyone should have that, and you'll be having guidance here. We can input power, distance, and these other factors to make the adjustment to your time and see the estimated finishing time. And then on the Stride mobile app, you can just create an event. So if you create an event, you'll have access to the Race Power Calculator event planner tools there. We have a question asking, when is real-time heat, humidity, and elevation power coming for Garmin Watch? So I know I've been teasing a lot of fantastic updates coming to Garmin Watch, and those are in the works now. So we're going to have a number of fantastic updates, including, I don't want to say too much. One of those features is environmental power, though. So stay tuned. They're not imminent, like it's not going to be the next few weeks, but they are in the works, and we have some great updates there. So stay tuned. We have a question saying, hey, Angus, just wondering, does the environmental predictor consider elevation when predicting? And yes, today I specifically covered heat and humidity, but also you can put in elevation. So one of the really common ways we see this used is, someone from Colombia, Colorado, another high altitude area coming down to elevation to race, New York City or, Boston Marathon. And you can see their power target, in this case, gets bumped up by a huge amount. So let's just hold temperature and humidity constant. Let's just change from roughly a mile high to sea level here. And we can see the power target would be adjusted upwards nearly 6%. So this is another one of those This is another one of those scenarios where you're gonna be running at a much higher speed than you might be used to when you come from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. So it's really important to simulate this in training and make sure you can maintain those higher speeds because metabolically you're going to be the conditions are going to be favorable, but mechanically you might have a harder time running those speeds. So that's something to simulate and practice in training. Really dial in on that power target, what you expect to be on race day, and practice that so you're ready to go and you can take full advantage of the more favorable conditions. And that's also true. I just showed the superpower calculator, but that's also true for race power calculator. You can input the elevation conditions as well. A few more questions here. Using Garmin, I have a Garmin watch. What app should I use on my watch for my race day to watch my power range? This is a fantastic question. This is something also we're going to be working on taking to the next level. But right now, we also have some really great tools. I know a lot of runners will sometimes just use stride zones, just place stride zones in their typical, race day race screen configuration, along with distance or lap time, a lap distance, and just use the real time power output to monitor there. That's my personal preference. But also, a lot of folks will build a event or a workout on their Stride account and import that into the Stride workout app, and you can have those power ranges, power alerts on your watch so that you're prompted to stay on those target ranges. So something to play with. I would definitely play with both Stride Zones data field and the Stride workout app, building a race or event on the Stride workout app. And we're looking to make this experience even better via future updates, so stay tuned. We did have a question also from how accurate is heat acclimation / training status in Garmin Connect? And one of the great advantages of using Stride, and I think Kaylee answered this in the chat, but for the environmental power feature on the Apple Watch and the feature we're going to be looking to bring to Garmin Watch, that is based on the temperature humidity sensors Stride uses. So we can capture that in real time, monitor those conditions in real time. So we can adjust over the course of a run, which is important for longer races. Let's say a long race starts in the morning in cooler conditions, it finishes in the afternoon when it's a bit warmer. One of the great advantages of using Stride is that it can adjust in real time over the course of that race. So it goes from the environmental adjustment might become, smaller as the race goes on, as it moves from really cool, favorable conditions to hotter, less favorable conditions. So I would definitely rely on the Stride data in that way because you're getting really accurate real-time adjustments from the Stride sensors. So I think that wraps up our questions for today, and just a few more points, a few more things to share on the Stride ecosystem. Upgrade to the Stride membership for access to the superpower calculator, and if you have Apple Watch, you can get the environmental power. Even just try it for a month, upgrade for a month, or a training cycle with our 4-month membership option or monthly membership option to check out some of these features. That can be really all you need to make the proper adjustments to prepare for your race. Is just a single training cycle with some of the Stride membership features, and experience the other fantastic features of the Stride membership, like workout of the week and other fantastic features we have. And if you're not yet running with the next gen Stride or a Stride sensor equipped with temperature and environmental sensors like heat and humidity, upgrade to the next gen Stride. You can get that at stride.com/store. In many regions, we have the Stride Plus membership bundles, so you can get the Stride, the next gen Stride Plus, the Stride membership for access to some of these features. So definitely check that out at stride.com/store and adjust your targets for all the hot and humid races this summer, and the more favorable conditions as it gets cooler this fall. And once again, we have some more fantastic content coming next month, predicting race capabilities, including some great workouts, some more race power calculator demos, and basically, what kind of running can you do today that'll help you, learn if you're on track for your goals, achieving that dream A race result, dream finishing time. We're gonna have some really great tips and workouts to achieve those goals. So stay tuned. We're gonna have that coming up in July. Watch your inbox, watch the Stride blog, follow us on social media at Stride Running on Instagram, and we're gonna have some really fantastic information there. So that's all for today. We're going to be putting all the information on Superpower Calculator and some links for Race Power Calculator in the description of the video. So check those out, click through, and thank you all for joining. I hope you have another fantastic week of training and racing with Power. Thanks, everyone.